Hello friends, welcome to my channel. In today's video we will be discussing on the topic, why did God break Jacob's hip? I believe we all have a lot to learn from this event. Let's continue. Why did God break Jacob's hip? Understanding this mysterious act. The story of Jacob wrestling with a mysterious man until daybreak has perplexed Bible scholars for ages. Though details are sparse, many believe Jacob's unnamed opponent was none other than a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus Christ himself. This leaves us with the question, why did God seemingly bring Jacob to the point of injury by dislocating his hip? Exploring the context provides some illuminating possibilities. Jacob's background led to the encounter. We must remember Jacob's deceptive character up to this point. He had wronged his brother Esau out of his birthright through manipulation of his father Isaac. He also connived his way into receiving the blessing meant for Esau by disguising himself. This set in motion a period of exile from his family for protection. Throughout, Jacob exhibited a willingness to take things into his own hands rather than patiently wait on God's promises. Even his sojourn with Laban was marred by instances of trickery. So while God chose Jacob, his walk lacked humility, trust, and obedience vital to a faithful patriarch. The impending confrontation was clearly meant to transform him. A night of transformation. Genesis 32 verse 24 tells us Jacob was left alone that night, likely reflecting on past failures. It was then an unnamed man wrestled with him until daylight. Though unable to overcome Jacob through physical prowess, this individual touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was wrenched. The dislocated joint left Jacob physically impaired but with a new dependency on God. Some scholars argue the symbolic injury mirroring Jacob's spiritual condition. He had been walking in his own strength rather than full reliance on the Lord up to this point. His very identity and approach to life needed an overhaul. A new name and purpose revealed. Significantly, after beating Jacob, the man demanded a blessing but now refused to disclose his name. Some believe this was because he was God incarnate before taking on human form as Jesus. By withholding identity, it magnified the exchange's supernatural nature and importance. From this point, Jacob was renamed Israel, reflecting how he has struggled with God and with men and has prevailed. He emerged with a new name, strength, and destiny rather than continuing on his dishonest course. The dislocated joint served as a constant reminder of humility and total dependence on the Lord alone. A lesson for all believers. There are valuable applications from this mysterious story for believers today. Even God's chosen are not above discipline if they walk in pride and apart from Him. Physical or circumstantial injuries may reflect a need for transformation in reliance solely on God rather than self-effort or abilities. We must be willing to ruthlessly abandon old, rebellious identities and characters shaped by sin. Persevering through hardships or wrestling can forge a new primacy of God in our lives and reveal our true name and destiny. So in summary, while mysteries remain, Jacob's encounter seems to have been a loving but necessary act to break him of self-reliance and redirect his life more fully towards God. May we learn humility from both his example and the broader lessons for obedient faith. The dislocated hip was a highly significant physical symbol of Jacob's transformed character for a few key reasons. It rendered him physically impaired and dependent on others for a time. This paralleled his need to now rely totally on God rather than his own abilities, cunning, and strength. The injury forced humility. It acted as a permanent reminder every time he moved of that fateful night of wrestling and submission. Just as he would feel the hip joint for life, so the experience transformed his self-identity down to his core. By touching his hip socket, it showed God had the power to both bless and afflict Jacob as he saw fit to reshape him. The dislocation was a very physical manifestation of divine discipline meant for Jacob's good. It symbolized the breaking or relinquishing of his old way of operating in the flesh apart from God. His previous mobility and independence were being shattered to make room for a new spiritual nature dependent on the Lord. He was left with a notable limp or impairment, highlighting that while forgiven and blessed, the consequences of past sins and failures could not be fully undone. Transformation is an ongoing process. So in a sense, God used the very real dislocated hip as an object lesson imprinted on Jacob's body. It perfectly exemplified the inner spiritual realignment God sought to establish through that profound encounter. The injury was a blessing in disguise that aided Jacob's transformation. Here are some key spiritual lessons modern believers can learn from Jacob's wrestling encounter. We must be willing to relinquish control and old identities shaped by sin/rebellion through radical submission to God. Even for believers, disobedience and self-reliance can lead to divine discipline for refining and redirection toward full reliance on Christ. Persevering through trials God brings can reveal our true spiritual identity and purpose determined by Him rather than fleshly desires. Physical and circumstantial hardships may reflect an inner work of breaking from living by our own power or wisdom and conforming fully to Christ. We should view any wounding meant to crush pride and self-sufficiency as loving discipline to transform us by reshaping our dependence on God alone. Lasting imprints from past failures or divine injuries can humble us and act as reminders to continually turn from the flesh. God desires we emerge from struggles with a new intimate knowledge of both Him and our true predestined identity in Christ. Our character and direction in life depends completely on openness to holy transformation through wrestling encounters with God. May we approach difficulties as opportunities to surrender fully to Christ, receive a new name and purpose from Him, and experience His sustaining power through continual reliance rather than self-effort alone. Jacob's new identity as Israel shaped his future relationship with God. Jacob emerged from his wrestling match with a new name, Israel, meaning he struggles with God. This identified him as one who depended on ongoing spiritual battle and reliance on God. No longer just Jacob, heel grabber. His new name Israel marked him as one who had prevailed and would be blessed by God rather than living independently. From then on, knowing God had changed and claimed him led Jacob to fully trust in divine promises and guidance rather than taking matters into his own hands. His new name served as a permanent reminder that he was defined by humility before God rather than self-effort. This kept his walk closely aligned with the Lord. Identifying as Israel meant depending on God's strength in him rather than his own skills or abilities. This fostered deep intimacy and obedience in their relationship. Jacob carried the new identity and its implications to his offspring, so they would also define themselves in relationship to God rather than earthly circumstances alone. Therefore, his renamed identity and all it represented transformed Jacob's entire life and legacy, keeping him and his people walking closely with God by faith in His power and promises. In these ways, Jacob's new name Israel birthed an altered relationship centered on daily trusting reliance on God rather than independence or self-definition. This dynamic shaped the patriarch and nation that followed. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more uplifting content. Bye for now and see you in my next video.